They called her a desk jockey, until one impossible shot turned an anonymous intel officer into the deadliest myth on the battlefield. Follow Lieutenant Mara Stormeye, Kolev as she climbs impossible ridges, reads the wind like scripture, and pulls a single trigger that saves lives and rewrites the rules of war. They say war sharpens the senses, that your ears hear farther, your eyes catch more, your breath slows just enough to feel the shift in the wind. I used to think that was poetic nonsense, until the day I lay soaked to the bone on Ridge Zeta, 2,300 meters above a kill zone, watching my team get torn apart. My name is Lieutenant Mara Kolev. Officially, I'm listed as an intelligence liaison stationed out of Fort Stryker, somewhere between the backroads of eastern Uzbekistan and nowhere. But anyone who's ever bled in that red clay knows the truth. I wasn't just liaison. I was the long shot, the last resort, the one they called when every angle was lost and the storm made cowards of satellites. It began with a whistle through the comms, then silence. We were operating in the Selvada Gorge, an ugly stretch of terrain that looked empty on maps, but hid dozens of perfect vantage points for ambush. A forward SEAL team had been moving toward a compound for recon. Simple in theory. In reality, it was a trap. We'd walked them straight into a cauldron, and they were now pinned under 3 intersecting lines of fire. No way out. No overwatch. No sniper support. The storm was too strong for drones. And the quick reaction force? Grounded by weather, same as always. I wasn't even supposed to be on deck that night. My assignment ended at briefing support and comm intercepts. Just another intel ghost in a borrowed uniform. But I had other plans. The sniper in me, the part my superiors pretended didn't exist, was already calculating. I knew that ridge. I'd studied its curves like a lover memorizing a scar. The wind screamed over it at 38 knots, and the rain felt like razors. To most, it was hell. To me, it was home. They didn't know about my father, Armin Kolev, a war-seasoned Balkan veteran who raised me in the wilderness of the Vysocina peaks. He taught me how to hear pressure drops in silence and shoot between heartbeats. I tracked wolves with him by age 11. By 16, I could outshoot half his militia friends. When he died in a training accident, I enlisted. The Navy offered intelligence. They never expected me to outscore half the sniper school candidates at Great Lakes. But I did. One instructor, a Marine veteran with a 1,000-yard stare, took one look at my grouping and didn't laugh like the others. He said, "This girl doesn't shoot bullets. She writes with them." SOCOM noticed. Quietly, they moved me into a compartmentalized program, deep recon fire integration. I wore a desk job on paper, but in the field, I watched, learned, and occasionally, if the math got bad enough, I shot. That night in Selvada, the math was a massacre. The SEALs were being carved up. Sergeant Valdez was already hit and losing blood. One more push, and we'd be writing condolence letters. I didn't ask permission. I walked straight into the armory, pulled a suppressed XM 2010 from the shelf, just another line item in our static defense protocol, and checked the chamber. Standard. 300 Win Mag. Not ideal in this wind, but it would have to do. "What are you doing?" Commander Darien asked. His voice held skepticism, not concern. "I'm going to end this," I said. He didn't stop me. Not after he pulled my sealed record and saw the sniper certification buried beneath the lines of redacted operations. I packed light. Just the rifle, a rangefinder, ballistic charts etched in my memory, and the wind. They thought Ridge Zeta was unreachable, but I'd been there before. During winter surveillance training, I'd mapped the angles myself. I knew it had one thing no other point had: an invisible perch with an unobstructed shot into the kill box. 2 clicks uphill in mud that gripped my boots like wet cement. My breath became rhythm. My legs remembered every slope, every unstable rock. 15 minutes in, I crawled to the ledge and found my spot. Below, the SEALs were cornered in a ravine, trying to pull Valdez into cover. They couldn't see the shooter, a ghost embedded behind a granite outcrop. But I saw the faint shimmer of glass. A scope catching stray lightning for a split second. I ranged it, 2,286 meters. Wind gusting hard crosswise at 37 knots. Impossible, they'd say. Maybe for others. I opened the bolt, loaded 5 rounds, and dialed in elevation and drift. The wind fought me, the rain blurred my lens, and still, I could see. I waited. For breath. For silence. For the moment every lesson my father taught me whispered in my ear. And then I squeezed. The moment I fired, the world seemed to hold its breath. Wind stalled for a fraction of a second, just enough for the round to slip past 1,000 shifting variables. The shot felt clean. Not lucky. Calculated. I kept my eye on the scope. The bullet took nearly 3 seconds to reach its destination. A full lifetime for anyone not used to waiting. Then the shimmer disappeared. The faint outline of the enemy sniper's rifle slumped. A blur of movement followed, panic across the enemy line. No return fire. I chambered the second round anyway. Because if there's one thing I've learned about war, it's that hesitation kills. I wasn't about to let a dead man's silence fool me. The second shot punched through the rocks behind where the spotter must have been. That one was for insurance. Below, the SEAL team began to move again. Valdez was barely conscious, dragging air through shredded lungs. Their medic worked in the dirt, hands moving faster than thought, packing gauze, improvising a SEAL, shouting for medevac that couldn't fly through this weather. And then my radio cracked. Zeta? That you? It was Lieutenant Kavanaugh, the kind of voice that sounds like it belongs in a bar fight, not a command tent. Shooter neutralized. I replied, keeping my tone flat. Proceed with exfil. A long pause. Zeta, you're Kolev, right? Copy. Another pause. Didn't know you were still active. I didn't reply. Some things don't need answers. By the time the forward air controller forced a medevac through the upper thermals, Valdez had lost almost half his blood. He survived. Barely. The others lifted him with the kind of reverence reserved for brothers in arms who danced too close to the edge. Back at Fort Stryker, I didn't go to the briefing room. I went to the tool shed. Every shooter has rituals. Mine is cleaning the rifle after a mission, even if it's spotless. Maybe it's superstition. Or maybe it's my way of marking survival. The rain pelted the tin roof above me like it had something to prove. I laid the XM 2010 across the bench and stripped it down with the care of a surgeon. Each part returned to silence under my hands. No applause. No medals. No thank you speeches. Just steel, cloth, and memory. When Commander Darien found me an hour later, he didn't speak right away. He looked at the rifle, then at me. His boots left red prints across the wet floor. I read your file, he said. I know. They buried your sniper cert behind 3 clearance layers. They wanted me to do paperwork. You just saved a 6-man team from dying in a gorge no one should have walked into. That wasn't paperwork. I said nothing. Let silence be my confirmation. You'll be hearing from Operations Command, he added. I didn't ask what for. I already knew. My shot had changed the game. Not just for Valdez and his team, but for everyone watching from the shadows. The moment I pulled that trigger, they couldn't ignore me anymore. And they wouldn't be able to pretend I was just another intel officer typing up threat assessments. Darien stepped back toward the door, then paused. What do they call you? He asked, voice quieter now. They don't. Yeah, well, that's about to change. The next morning, the mood on base had shifted. Not in any overt way. No banners. No handshake lines. Just 100 subtle changes in posture and silence. People who'd once passed me in the halls without a nod now paused. Eyes lingered. Not suspicious, curious. It was Commander Darien who summoned me into the glass-walled operations room overlooking the base's training field. He didn't offer a seat. Division Chief wants to talk to you, he said. About what happened in Salvada. I folded my arms. They want a reprimand? They want you on Task Unit Vega. Direct action. Embedded sniper analyst. That gave me pause. Vega wasn't just another team. They were the ghost unit. The one command never listed publicly. If you got tapped for Vega, you either did something impossible or didn't survive trying. Why? I asked. Because the shot you made shouldn't have been possible. Not under those conditions. And because the guys you saved? They filed their own request. They want you watching their 6. That last part hit harder than expected. In our world, trust is earned inch by bloody inch. And having a SEAL team personally request you, that's not a compliment. It's a contract. Still, I hesitated. They know what I am. They know enough, Darien said. The rest is classified, and let's keep it that way. He handed me a folder. Inside, satellite imagery, logistics summaries, enemy call intercepts. And on the last page, scrawled in ink, Ridge Zeta, Asset Kolev. Confirmed effective. Below that, one word circled in red. Stormeye. That was their name for me. I didn't like it, but I knew how these things worked. You get one clean hit in impossible weather, and suddenly you're a myth in the making. Nicknames are branding for soldiers. And Stormeye had already caught fire. At mess that night, I felt it firsthand. The chatter hushed when I walked in. Someone muttered, "That's her." I sat alone. Didn't take long before one of them approached, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the gait of someone who'd seen his share of nightmares. Chief Petty Officer Reese Morgan, team lead for the Vega unit. He slid into the seat across from me like we were old friends. "You really nailed that shot from the ridge?" he asked. I didn't look up. "If I hadn't, you wouldn't be sitting here." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Fair." A beat passed. Then he leaned in. "We lost our last shooter 2 months ago. No one's filled the slot since. Command wants us to vet the next pick ourselves." I kept eating. And we vote tonight. Unanimous decision required. That got my attention. Why unanimous? Because when the storm hits and bullets start flying, the last thing any of us can afford is doubt. We need to believe the person watching us from the ridge isn't going to blink. I met his gaze fully for the first time. "I don't blink." Morgan studied me for a moment, then stood. "We'll see." The vote happened in silence. I wasn't present. That's how it works. They don't want you in the room. Don't want your voice, your explanations, your resume. Just the facts as they live them and the gut feeling that follows. Reese Morgan delivered the verdict the next morning. "You're in," he said without ceremony. "Training cycle starts in 48 hours. No handshake. No congratulations. Just a nod." I reported to the airfield 2 hours later to meet the rest of the team. 5 operators, each with enough scars and shadows to fill 10 stories. Their eyes didn't linger long, but they looked, really looked. You could feel the weighing happening behind the stillness. The second in command, Staff Sergeant Luisa Delgado, gave me the most open look. "You really pulled that trigger through a storm?" she asked, arms crossed. "I don't pull triggers," I replied. "I deliver decisions." Delgado smiled, just a twitch at the corner of her mouth. Then she said, "You'll fit." The team didn't train like the regulars. Vega ran full mission simulations, weather be damned. Live fire, real terrain, unknown variables. No scripts, just chaos dressed in camo. That first week, they threw me into everything. Observation drills from rotting hilltops. Speed climbs with a 30-pound rifle. Target ID in zero light conditions. My favorite? A 3-minute engagement sim where I had to locate 5 enemy silhouettes through fog, gusts, and blind terrain, all while recalculating wind drift every 15 seconds. I hit 4. Reese watched through the scope, expression unreadable. Afterward, he simply handed me a protein bar and walked off. By week 2, we were running full team ops. Coordinated movement under pressure. Drone overwatch relays. Direct fire support. In a war game simulation, we were tasked with clearing a valley checkpoint under enemy control. They assumed I'd post up a kilometer out and watch. Instead, I moved with the breach team, posted up 600 meters from target, close enough to hear breath, far enough to hit without needing confirmation. When the breach failed and the enemy pushed hard, I dropped 3 leaders in under 4 seconds. The 4th tried to run. I tagged him mid-turn. The rest surrendered. After the dust settled, Delgado looked at me across the clearing and said, "We've had snipers before. We've never had someone who thought like you." That night, around the team fire pit, someone slid me a flask. "Tradition," they said. "Stormeye," Morgan muttered, lifting his own tin cup. "To the one who sees through chaos." The name still felt too heavy, too performative, but I didn't correct them. Let them name what they need. I didn't come for glory. I came for the silence between gunfire, for the chance to make the impossible possible, for the exact second when everything fails and the math still works. I came for the ridge. 2 weeks into my assignment with Vega, we got the call. An intel asset embedded near the Black Crescent Mountains had gone dark, an informant codenamed Grainhook. Last comms indicated he'd uncovered a clandestine weapons deal moving through the hills. Satellite imagery showed a convoy, then static. No drones could penetrate the cloud cover above that range, and the terrain was a nightmare for aerial support. Command needed eyes on target. Vega got tasked for the recon extraction package. But there was a catch. The last known location sat deep within the Crimson Fold, a jagged, ancient formation where wind shifted every minute and sound echoed for miles. No sniper had ever been successfully deployed there without exposure. Reese looked at me during briefing. Can you shoot in the fold? I didn't answer. I just turned and began packing my rifle. The approach required a 5-hour silent trek through razor brush and shale. We moved under moonlight, our steps measured, breathing through our teeth to keep vapor from giving us away. I took high ground along an old shepherd's route that bent into a half-bowl overlooking the valley. At that angle, I could see the camp tucked under an overhang, 5 tents for vehicles, 2 guard towers, and a lot of heat signatures moving in unnatural patterns. Reese whispered through comms. Confirm enemy strength? 17 minimum. Possible 20. 1 mounted gun facing north. Hostage is in the far tent, marked with thermal panels to block drone view. How the hell do you see through that? I'm not looking through it, I replied. I'm watching the wind. Delgado's voice cut in, impressed. Say again. Wind picks up heat sent off the fabric. Patterns off on that one tent. That's where they're hiding something warm. A pause. Then Reese said, We move on your call, Stormeye. I hated how that name was sticking, but I'd take the weight if it meant getting our man out alive. I gave them the count. Marking time, 3 minutes to breach. On breach, I'll silence the towers. 2.5 minutes later, I saw a flicker on the upper ridge, a glint of optics. Not ours. Hold, I whispered. Overwatch spotted. Secondary sniper team. Position, South Crag, 80 meters above East Tower. They're waiting for our breach. Can you take it? Reese asked. I checked my angle. Distance, 1,492 meters. Crosswind reading, 29 knots from the northeast. Elevation gain, 64 meters. Time slowed. The way it always does when the world sharpens. I ran the math. Dialed my scope. On my shot, I said. Breathed. Listened. The shot cracked through silence. The enemy Overwatch didn't fire. He never got the chance. 2 seconds later, the ridge above him exploded in dust as my second round cut through his spotter's perch. Breach now, I said calmly. Vega moved like liquid shadow, exploding from the brush, neutralizing the towers before the guards could yell. Inside the tent, Delgado found the informant. Bruised, dehydrated, but alive. We melted back into the terrain before the enemy even knew how many of us there had been. When we reached the evac point, Reese turned to me and muttered, That shot saved all of us. Again. Delgado added, Stormeye doesn't blink. I didn't correct her. Somewhere inside, though, I knew this wasn't just skill. This was memory, legacy, and pain all braided into every breath I took behind the scope. My father had taught me to read the wind, but war taught me to bend it. After the Crimson Fold op, things changed fast. Command stopped pretending I was an intel officer with a side hobby. I was transferred off the administrative chain and into a classified group under Joint Special Reconnaissance Command. Vega was listed as my permanent assignment. No more temp badges. No more desk duty. And they gave me a rifle. Not loaned. Issued. Custom forged stock. Matte black barrel. Chambered in. 300 Norma Magnum. Threaded for a suppressor. And paired with a scope I'd only ever seen in black budget labs. The serial number had been scratched out. An old operator's superstition. It felt like respect. Or maybe just recognition of inevitability. Reese said, They're not calling it a promotion. But they're watching. The missions blurred. One after another, like clock ticks in a long, sleepless night. Coastal intercepts in Kandar. Mountain overwatch near the Irani border. A rescue in the Vashti ice fields. I shot through sleet, sand, darkness, and a dozen different lies told by terrain. Each time, the team returned intact. Each time, I remained a name in whispers. Stormeye. No one knew who started it. But it was in briefing rooms now, scribbled in margins. A kind of code. A question. Do we have a Stormeye on this one? And if the answer was yes, the mood shifted. Confidence. Not arrogance. Just the belief that when things broke down, there would be a breath, one clean second, where order returned through the crack of a rifle. I didn't crave the name, but I understood what it gave them. People need myths. Especially in war. And I'd learned long ago how to become one when needed. Still, I never stopped being Mara Kolev. I cleaned my own rifle. Trained alone in the early hours. Kept a journal of wind patterns from every ridge I'd shot from. Not for glory. For math. You want to survive this job, you honor the numbers. But even numbers can't prepare you for what came next. We were called to intercept a rogue convoy suspected of carrying next-gen targeting equipment to a breakaway faction in eastern Zarnak. The twist? 2 NATO advisors had been taken hostage as guests to ensure safe passage. Command didn't want escalation. Watch and wait, they said. Confirm targets. Only shoot if the hostages are in immediate danger. We tracked the convoy across 2 border zones. I posted up on an abandoned minaret that had long since turned to ruin. Distance to the center vehicle, 2,103 meters. The lead jeep carried 3. The rear truck held 2 more and a satellite comm array. The hostages? Cramped in the middle transport, faces pale, blindfolds frayed. Then one of the guards raised a weapon. Not at us, at the hostages. Stormeye status? Reese asked. I dialed the scope. Weapon drawn. Aggression probable. Are you green? No, I said. Not yet. Then the guard hit one of the hostages in the gut with his rifle butt. They dropped, gasping. Now. I adjusted half a click left. Now. The bullet crossed 1 kilometer and struck just under his collarbone. Enough to incapacitate. Not to kill. The convoy froze. I dropped the second round to take out the comms array. No outbound signal. No request for reinforcements. The entire convoy collapsed into chaos. Our team moved in under that confusion, secured the hostages, and exfiltrated before anyone even knew what direction the shots had come from. Another cleanup. Another report where my name appeared only as external Overwatch support. As the sun dropped below the hills that night, Reese leaned over during gear check and said quietly, "How do you keep hitting shots no one else would even take?" I looked at the horizon. "The wind talks," I said. "And you listen?" I nodded. "Every time. You don't wake up one morning and realize you're a myth. It happens slowly. Over missions. Over silence. Over the way people stop asking questions when you walk into a room." Back at Fort Stryker, word had traveled. Operators from other units started showing up at the range during my off hours. Not to talk, just to watch. Some took notes. Others tried to replicate my calculations. A few just stared in quiet disbelief when the targets rang at 2,000 meters without wind flags. One afternoon, a young recon scout named Jansen approached me. Nervous. Almost trembling. "Ma'am," he said, "they say you shot through a sandstorm in Vashti last month. Is that true?" "No one sees the wind," I said. "You feel it. You respect it. You measure the lie it tells." He didn't understand. Not really. But he nodded anyway. When he walked away, I heard him whisper to another scout. "She talks like she's part of the storm." I didn't correct him. If the myth helped him survive, it was worth it. But inside, I still remembered what it felt like to be ignored. Dismissed. Labeled a liability because I didn't fit the image of what a sniper was supposed to look like. 5'3". No bulk. No swagger. Just a quiet Balkan girl with a 1,000-yard stare and fingers that never trembled. They used to laugh at that. Now they watched my hands like they were sacred. Then came the letter. Hand-delivered by courier. Black envelope. Red seal. No insignia. Inside, coordinates, elevation, weather conditions, and one line handwritten at the bottom. "You're the only one we trust to see this." The target was real. An insurgent general operating under a deep cover identity. He was suspected of coordinating cross-border raids under the guise of local tribal resistance. Dozens dead already. More if left unchecked. The twist? He would be attending a secret meeting in a neutral village deep in the contested zone. No official strike authorized. No ground units allowed. Just me. The shot would have to be made from a decommissioned mining ridge. Elevation 8,400 feet, distance to target 2,307 meters. Wind gusts up to 42 knots. 3 angles of crossfire. No spotter. I accepted before they finished explaining. Some shots don't belong to protocol. They belong to instinct. To history. To something older than orders. I reached the ridge just before dusk. The climb was brutal. Loose shale, no trails, freezing wind that sliced through my gloves like glass. Every meter gained was paid for in bloodied knuckles and shredded boot soles. But when I reached the edge, it was perfect. The world below stretched wide, the valley like a broken bowl, the village lit faintly by smuggled generator lights. Men moved through it like shadows, unaware that the air above them was already calculating their ending. I built my nest from local rock and tarp. No metal, no telltale glint, just patience and mathematics. The wind was cruel. It spun like a drunk, shifting direction every few seconds. I'd trained for this. My father had made me shoot across frozen lakes with storm fronts rolling in. No flags, no meters, just instinct. I lay prone and took it all in. Distance, 2,307 meters. Elevation drop, 662 feet. Wind, 42 knots from the west, shearing into a sudden 33 at midpoint, then dropping to 18 near target. Humidity, 96%. Barometer falling. Most would call it impossible. I called it familiar. I waited. The general emerged just after 2,100. No fanfare. No bodyguards. Just a dark coat, a cigarette, and the casual arrogance of a man who believed no one could touch him this deep in the zone. He stood in profile, talking to another man. The body language was clear, command and deference. The target wasn't marked by uniform. He was marked by gravity. I zeroed him. Factored Coriolis. Spin drift. Air density. Took one breath. Felt for the lull in the chaos. Wind dropped. Just for a moment. Like the earth inhaled and forgot to exhale. That's when I fired. It took just over 3 seconds. In that time, I saw everything. The way the smoke from his cigarette curled. The blink of his eye. The final turn of his head. Then the bullet struck. He dropped before the sound ever reached the village. Panic followed. Shouts. Footsteps. Flashlights. All aimed the wrong way. They'd never find me. I ghosted back down the mountain the same way I came. Not a trace left behind. No name signed to the shot. Just silence. Back at Fort Stryker, Reese met me at the helipad. You did it. I nodded. Confirmation. Let's just say he won't be smoking again. Reese cracked a rare smile. You've made believers out of everyone. I didn't come to make believers, I said. But they believe anyway, he replied. Later that night, I walked into the team room. Mounted above the gear racks, beside plaques and pinned unit crests, was my rifle. The one I'd carried on the first ridge. Ridge Zeta. Retired. Framed. Revered. Below it, a single inscription. One shot. One change. Some weeks later, during a joint exercise in northern Karak, I got a message from an old training instructor, Lieutenant Commander Rayburn, the one who'd spotted my first shooting scores back at Great Lakes. His message was simple. Told them you weren't ordinary. They didn't listen. They're listening now. There was no pride in his words. Just quiet vindication. I thought about that for a long time. Because there's a loneliness to being the one they call when it all falls apart. No one understands what it means to feel time slow. To count wind shifts like drumbeats. To know that lives hang on your steadiness. Even within Vega, I was still the I. The one out on the ridge. Alone. That's the part they never talk about in recruitment ads. You don't get to celebrate with the team. You don't kick down doors or pull comrades from wreckage. You stay above it all, a ghost on a rock ledge, watching, judging, waiting. But the strange thing is, you start to love it. The solitude, the silence, the clarity. From the ridge, everything makes sense. Politics fade. Chaos has order. And every shot, if taken right, is an act of mercy. A reset. I started mentoring a few new marksmen when we rotated off active missions. Delgado pushed for it. Said the next generation needed more than instructors. They needed real stories. Real failures. Real math. So I took them to the cliffs near Range 9, where the wind howls in the afternoon and light plays tricks with distance. We shot from 1,500 meters on day 1. The recruits missed every round. By day 4, one of them landed a clean hit. You're not teaching us how to shoot, he said, surprised. No, I replied. I'm teaching you how to see. Reese watched the sessions quietly. He never interfered. Then one night over coffee, he said, You ever think of walking away? All the time, I said. But you won't. No, I replied. Because if I leave, who's watching the ridge? He nodded. There was no more to say. The last mission I ran with Vega was the kind that doesn't make the books. No names. No after-action reports. Not even a timestamp. Just a set of coordinates burned into a memory chip and a flight plan that ended at an unmarked airfield between dust and sky. We were deployed not for what was happening, but for what might. A warlord with access to biochem assets. Rumors of an auction. Hostile buyers from 3 continents. No proof. Just whispers. And that was enough. Vega was tasked to intercept. We infiltrated undercover of a sandstorm, the kind that scrapes your soul raw. My perch was a shattered water tower, barely standing, rusted hollow. but it gave me eyes on the whole meeting compound. Targets moved like shadows in fog. Wind cut sideways at 46 knots. One wrong call, and I'd start an international crisis. One missed shot, and people would die screaming. I counted steps, studied lips, compared intel photos to silhouettes. And when the man in the long coat stepped into view, flanked by 2 armed sentries, I knew. He wasn't a buyer. He was the broker. The storm masked the sound of my bolt chambering. My hands didn't shake. They never do now. I breathed, waited for the wind to die just enough. Then I fired. His body dropped like a marionette with strings cut. Before anyone could move, I fired again. And again. 3 rounds. 3 men. Reese and the team stormed in under the cover of the confusion, grabbing files, gear, and something cold and metallic from a locked case. I never saw what it was. Didn't need to. Mission success. Exfil clean. No casualties. But something shifted in me after that. Maybe it was the silence that followed. Or the way the team looked at me differently, like they knew I'd given just a little more than I should have. I turned in my rifle 3 weeks later. No ceremony. No goodbyes. Just a quiet message to Reese. You've got the ridge now. I moved back to the Visocina range. The same mountains where I used to follow my father's footprints through snow and shadow. I teach now. Not for money. Not for glory. Just to pass it on. They still call me Stormeye in the circles that matter. But here, in the frost and pine, I'm just Mara. The wind still speaks. And sometimes, when it howls just right, I remember the ledge on Ridge Zeta, the weight of the shot that changed everything. I don't regret it. Because in the end, the hardest part of taking the shot isn't the trigger pull. It's convincing the world that you should be the one to take it. And then doing it anyway. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.